Hello, everyone. This is the fourth part of this story. If you haven't seen the previous ones, we recommend you watch it first. Then winter came. The road to the highway was blocked and covered with snow. I made a deal in the village, and the tractor driver managed to clear it so that a car could pass over it for 2 bottles of vodka. The noise of a car engine woke me up. I did not get up for some time, trying to retain fragments of a dream. I cautiously got off the bed and, shivering from the cold, went to the window. Right in front of the house, a big black car stopped and a subject got out of it with difficulty. A bodyguard in all his primal glory. After the bodyguard, the young subject climbed out of the car, followed by my still wife, Sveta. She slipped, but the young man managed to support her by the elbow. They stared at the house as if waiting for the Wizard of the Emerald City to appear. I put on my coat and went out onto the porch. I was silent. Uninvited guests were the first to raise their voices. "Are you the host?" the bodyguard said menacingly. I threw my jacket on the parapet and came down from the porch. It seems that the man was in a belligerent mood. Talek calmed down, suddenly came up with his voice feeder and turned to me. "Sorry for the intrusion, but we need to talk. Maybe you want to invite me into the house?" I shrugged. Sveta looked in the car. "Samuel," she called. Another character climbed out of the car with a grunt. I knew him. A famous divorce lawyer. "Move it, you bastards." I turned to the door. "Come on in." Frankly, I don't like uninvited guests. Cautiously, stepping on the icy steps, Sweeter and the lawyer came into the hallway. After them reached out and the good man. But I stopped him with my hand against his chest. "We need to talk to your mother." You should have seen his face. If he could have, he'd have torn me to pieces. But he couldn't, and he knew it. Lucia turned round at the door and said a polite hello to the uninvited guests. She quickly realized that Sveta was my wife. I could tell by the jealousy in her eyes. Sveta also looked curiously at Lucy. "Quickly that you were comforted." Could not help it through her teeth. She muttered. I said angrily, "Tell me what you want." The lawyer sat down on a stool and opened his briefcase. "Yuri, your wife is suing the court to declare you incompetent. You at one time had a severe concussion, which gave complications that led to a temporary mental disorder. You should be examined at a psychiatric hospital to determine your legal capacity." The lawyer chewed his lips. "The question is whether you will do so voluntarily, or whether we will have to go to the appropriate authorities to enforce your appearance. As far as I understand, the examination is done by court order. Do you have it in your hands?" I looked at the lawyer calmly. "And where do you want to go to forcibly lock me up in a mental hospital?" My pressure somewhat discouraged the lawyer. "Euro, I'm worried about your health. You need to take a course of treatment. The doctors will help you get rid of your obsessions. And you'll go back to your family. The children are so upset. They want to see you." Sveta almost sobbed with resentment for the children. "The question is, do I want to see them?" I thought and out loud said, "I understand your desire to quickly put me in the asylum, ostensibly for my own good. But you were in a hurry. There was no trial and I don't need any counseling. I won't discuss anything with you. Sveta, take your lackeys and get off my land." I looked expressively at the gun hanging on the wall. "Are you threatening?" "Samuel, I told you, he's inadequate and aggressive." Sveta looked at the lawyer pleadingly. "In that case, we are forced to ask for help." The lawyer pulled out his cell phone. "Sveta, stop. You're making another mistake." I tried to speak calmly. "Let's solve everything in peace. Yura, it's all for your own good. You'll thank me later." She took a step toward me, trying to hug me. "Come on. Get out of here." I pointedly looked at the hanging shotgun. "You're crazy for sure." Sveta shrieked and looked at the lawyer. "Samuel, do something. I told you to get out." I held the gun with the barrel down. You're threatening us with a gun. You really are crazy. The lawyer jumped up, knocking over a stool. He grabbed my wife by the arm and dragged her toward the exit. They rolled off the porch in a heap. I followed them out onto the porch. Get in the car and go. But before I could say anything, a police van pulled up to the house. The door opened, and gun-wielding soldiers poured out of the van like peas from a pod. They definitely surrounded the house, cutting off my escape route. Mr. Kolsev, drop your weapons and come out with your hands up. A bubbly major squawked into the loudspeaker. That's love. Sweta decided to hold me by any means necessary. I even respected her, but not for long. A black SUV drove up to the picturesquely positioned Special Forces. A young man stepped out of it and looked over the battlefield. Who's in charge? He turned to the frozen policeman. And who are you? The bumpy major walked up to the stranger. The man took his ID card out of his pocket and shoved it under the major's nose. Colonel Kazantsev, head of the Special Operations Division of the Department of National Security. On what grounds and by whose order? Are the Special Forces involved? Well, that is, we received a call that a man was holding a hostage in this house. The major was clearly out of his depth. They said that the owner of this house is crazy. Take your men and go away. We'll deal with you later. Sweta and her companions froze in surprise. The situation was changing like a child's kaleidoscope. The policeman quickly piled into the minibus and drove away. The colonel approached Vitor's car. Hello, Svetlana. He politely said hello. Do I know you? Sweta raised her eyebrows in surprise. Only in absentia. Mr. General told me about you. He paused for a moment and then added only good things. My advice to you, solve everything amicably. Sweta dazedly looked from me to the colonel. Did you say general? She stretched her head in surprise. Yes. For the whole year. And you did not know? My former deputy headed towards me. Hello, Yuri. Why didn't you make your wife happy? He smiled as he came up on the porch. Sometimes it's better to know less. Even devoted wives. I shook his outstretched hand. Lucia stayed with me for a while. Gradually she thawed out. Her roommate made no more attempts to get her back, knowing full well what that would entail. By the way, the police no longer came after me either. Apparently, some underground channels leaked information about a retired general who did not like uninvited guests. I took Lucy into town. We visited a beauty salon and several fancy boutiques, and the woman was transformed. She went from a frightened, slutty girl to a beautiful princess. I took her to the clinic to a doctor I knew. They examined Lyusha and found nothing dangerous except for one thing. She would never have children again. The effect of numerous abortions performed at one time on the orders of her master. I did not ask how old she was, but she looked about 30. She had her whole life ahead of her. Despite the fact that I really liked her, I tried to keep her at a distance, cutting off all attempts to get close to me. In every way, you can't cheat age. She was too young and too beautiful to be with me. My train had already skipped past the penultimate station and was approaching its terminus at break speed. Besides, I was fed up with being in a relationship with a woman, and I didn't want any more disappointment or problems. A month later, some distant relative of hers came along and invited her to stay with her. Lucia was in a hurry. I supplied her with money and wished her happiness. The last night before she left, Lucia came to me, and I could not resist. How can a single man refuse something beautiful young woman? And it all happened. Once the whole time, she was waiting for me to ask her to stay, but I said nothing. In the morning, she stood by the cab for a long time, still hoping for something. And then she left my life. We divorced Vita in the end, although she begged me in court not to leave her. Don't leave her. As if she wasn't the one who had taken a young lover under my nose and been fooling around with him for almost 6 months. I even had my doubts about having kids, but the DNA tests reassured me. The absence of her husband took its toll on Sveriter. It was obvious that she really regretted our breakup. My ex-wife came to see me several times and begged me to forgive her. She said that she had broken up with her lover at once and that she was carrying her lover around with her to piss me off. And she succeeded. I, of course, forgave her so many years together, but I never went back to her. Children? What about children? I love them, but I don't let them near me, especially my daughter. Still very fresh resentment. Masha also tried to talk to me, but I categorically refused to talk to her. God is her judge. The receptionist stood up. Mr. General, the director is waiting for you. When I entered the office, Vardik stood up from his desk and came out to meet me. We embraced. How did you do it? I pulled away and looked at my friend. It was almost impossible. Well, no more difficult than you. Pull me badly wounded from the battlefield. Vardik, that is the director of the Department of National Security, laughed. Take over the position, no more sitting in retirement. He was silent for a while and smiling, slyly, asked. Have some cognac. P.S. A year had passed. My car was rushing along the highway, dispersing the light snow that had fallen overnight, leaving a fast lingering trail behind it. In some places, I could still see the miraculously preserved bright, red-yellow foliage, especially against the background of the green-brown autumnal forest. I even felt sorry for it for a minute. I returned from my business trip and was on my way home, where I hadn't been in more than a month. All that time I had been living alone, enjoying my freedom. I had rebuilt the house, traveled a lot. Only now did I get a real taste of life. But more and more often at night, I dreamt about Lyusha. Alas, the past could not be undone. I knew that we were not destined to be together. And she never even called me once during all this time. Apparently, she had found her happiness after all. But I put the old lock on the new door just in case. And when I left, I always kept the key in its old place. After 10 kilometers, I turned off onto an unpaved road. The wheels crunched the thin ice in puddles glistening in the dim autumn sun. The road turned sharply to the left and ended in a one-story house made of pine logs. I parked the car, took a bulky bag out of the trunk and went up to the porch. Suddenly, the door opened and a young woman with a baby in her arms came out towards me. Hi. Lucy Shilley looked into my eyes. We were waiting for you. The sun was shining brightly. The sky was almost clear, and its dazzling blue cut my eyes. A fresh breeze from the lake plate with the tops of the tall pines lifting up sparkling white clouds.